Coming to you live from the aircraft carrier Intrepid. I am Jon Najarian, and the Rebel's Edge is about to deliver the information you need to make smarter decisions today. So, in other words, we're predictive, not just reactive. You want more? Bang! Stay tuned.
All right, from the Intrepid, or what? I mean,
Yeah.
it's always parts unknown, but what this one's kind of known now.
Yeah, well, it's the aircraft carrier Intrepid. It's on about 40th Street on the West Side Highway, and it's a great museum now, but obviously it was a fighting ship for a lot of years. And every year, I think Mark said this is the 8th year, Pete, that the Battlefin New York has been aboard this ship. And it's really cool. I wish I could show you I'm staring out at the Hudson River on the back here, the fantail. Isn't that what you call the back of the boat? The fantail, as opposed to Mark's fan gals that follow him in here.
Hey, man, just don't say the word only. Anyway, I was just going to say, this, John. It's not too terribly far away from when the pilot brought that son of a gun in for a landing on that waterway, right?
Yeah. Yep, very true. Sullenberger was right out there, folks, literally right out there. And again, what a fabulous job by that guy.
Yeah.
But this is the Rebel's Edge. He is Pete Najarian. I'm Jon Najarian. Jared is handling all the other duties other than the yabbering you're about to hear from us. But we start every show with a macro minute. We have added a VIX report from Pete to the fantastic futures. So let's dive right in, shall we, Pete?
Let's do it. Let's get it.
All right.
Macro, baby.
Macro, I'm going to say that Waller, which is one of the Fed governors, is saying, you know what? One good report isn't going to be enough to get us to start lightening up on interest rates. He said, I want to see several months of good reports before we'll even consider it. Now, he's just one member, but you guys all know how that works. It's a committee, and even the Fed chairman himself can't just dictate what it's going to be. What do you got for macro, Pete?
Well, I would say this, number one, he must have been watching me yesterday when I was on the Schwab network, John, because that's exactly what I said. I said, it's great to see it, but this is just one. We need a little more than one. And so I totally agree with him. I would say that, the focus always, we look at macro. There's not much more macro than the 10-year. The 10-year at the latter part of April was sitting right around 4.73, John. Now we're seeing it a lot lower than that. It's been dropping. That's obviously a good thing. Call it 435 to 441, somewhere in that sort of a range. I think from that perspective, that's why we are seeing the markets actually bet at these record highs, because we're losing a little bit of that. It gives people a little more comfort to jump back into the markets. I think that's what's helping at least elevate these markets today.
Well, we are going to talk futures now, Pete. So let's talk fantastic futures. Fantastic futures. I'm going to say, Pete, Ethereum. And some of you will look at that and say, it's cryptocurrency. What's the future? Well, they do trade futures on Ethereum, ETH or ETH. And there's apparently about a 75% chance that they're going to approve an ETF, an exchange traded fund, just like they have for Bitcoin, Pete. So that's going to be my fantastic futures today.
All right, you brought up volatility. I'm going to give you volatility, John.
Okay.
So in mid-April, we were in the 19s. A little bit later into April, we actually hit 21 on one of those sessions after that run up towards that level in the 19s. So that's where we were. But where are we now? And I think that's the most important thing. Well, Friday we closed under 12. We were at not much, but it was 11.99. And now here we are hovering around the low 12s. I think that's a big statement from the standpoint of, are we afraid right now? Doesn't seem like it. A lot of the big catalysts were through the majority of the biggest portions of earnings. So other than NVIDIA coming up on Wednesday, but outside of that, we are through an enormous number. And so because of that, I think people are a little bit more calm, a little bit more relaxed. I would say this, with the VIX down here at these levels, I would be much more of a buyer of things in the volatility world, specifically in our options world, John, than I probably was in the last 3 or 4 weeks. So this is something very, very good. I think it's a gift that we have the VIX somewhere near 12.
I agree, Pete. And by the way, folks, that behind me right back here, whoops, the other side, right back there is the Battlefin logo and so forth, because since we're here in the Intrepid aircraft carrier, this is alternative data. So this is like geolocation, satellite data, all kinds of different ways to analyze data and to let people trade and invest off of it, Pete. And it's pretty interesting because he was right, the guy from Placer AI, one of the many speakers here, about something that we're about to cover right now as we dive into our 4 stocks today. So let's kick it off with Palo Alto Networks. Now, this isn't one of them that he was able to give us data on, Pete, but there are plenty of companies here that could have, because despite exceeding Q3 expectations, Palo Alto fell down to about $300 a share. That was about a 9 or a 10% drop, like that. We bounced off of there, and now we're only down about 3%. But the company expects earnings in the range of $1.40 to $1.42. That basically was in line, maybe on the lower end, Pete, or in line, but that's not the kind of positive guidance people were hoping for.
No, and as a matter of fact, it was fairly conservative guidance, John. I mean, there's a lot of numbers in there that look good, but it's always that time where you've got to kind of backpedal and take a little bit of a longer look. So what do I mean by that? Well, the revenue growth was 15%. That sounds pretty great, right? That's the slowest growth that they have had since 2020. So even though they have that growth, it is slowing, and that is always a trigger for people. They want to see, are you growing, but are you growing at a pace that we need? And apparently this 15%, certainly that's a lot slower than they had been growing. So it made people probably very negative, and that's why I think we had so much selling. That being said, some of the bulls decided to come back in. This is a stock that hit 300 very early, and now here we are closer to 312. 52-week highs is 380. Sort of right in the middle right now, but a little bit closer to that 380 number. So when I look at these earnings, yeah, the guidance wasn't quite as acceptable as maybe you'd want it to be. That kind of hurt them. But also the slowing down, the bookings also, another area where it's slowing. That growth actually, John, is all the way back to 2012 when it IPO'd. The billings were up 3%, but that's the slowest that they've been going up since that time frame. So there is something to be said for that, and people are looking for growth. They got some growth, but the growth isn't anything like it was before.
Yeah, well, this is one of them, one of many, Pete, that people have cut back on pretty severely. And so it's not a question of that they're panicking out of some of these tech stocks, but to the extent that you don't say something about AI in your report, for the most part, it's hands out for a lot of these stocks. And now we get to one that, like I say, Placer AI was talking about, Pete, and that's Lowe's. They were saying, hey, Lowe's should do very well in their earnings report. This is based on their foot traffic. One of the things that they're famous for, Pete, is tracking foot traffic. You know, that's everything from cell phone signals and so forth to other measurements of how people are moving around and what they're doing. And if they're going into Lowe's a lot, well, that's probably a pretty good sign, because people don't just kick the tires when they go into Lowe's, they're buying stuff. And the comparable same-store sales decline came in better than expected. And that's why the stock popped to the upside. But then the inverse of what we just talked about with Palo Alto happened. And even though it came out better, now they're hitting it. After a brief rally, Pete, they came in and started selling.
Well, and I think the problem is the DIY, the spending demand there really kind of pulled back significantly, John. Some of the sales declines that we had seen as well, the guidance was solid, but it wasn't anything exciting. So that kind of held people back. By the way, same-store sales decreased for the 6th straight quarter. So there are numbers that they lower the numbers, John, so you can step over it sometimes, whether it's earnings or revenue or whatever it might be. So it looks like they really are beating. But are they? Are they beating, or have they lowered that bar significantly? And I think that's part of the problem. That's why Lowe's, I think early on, some of the numbers that they gave, people were excited about it. Then they suddenly looked a little bit deeper and started to change their mind a little bit. That's why the stock was at 231. Now it's trading right around 222. So I think it's interesting. I like it, but they've got to get those folks in the store and spending the money. And they're seeing some of the foot traffic. They're in the store, but they're not buying as much as they once were. And I think that's part of the problem.
Yeah. Some of the other folks, Pete, that track things like receipts that get emailed out to people and so forth, were saying that, yeah, they're shopping and they are spending, but they're not spending as much.
Right.
So you're spot on there. They're, and in many cases, they're trading down from like a brand name like Black & Decker or something like that down to the house brands and things like that. But that's the way things go when people are not feeling quite as confident. Let's take a look at a place where Zim Integrated Shipping, these guys, Pete, are one of the container companies that brings a lot of what we're talking about to the U.S. market, because container shipping for Q1 had a top and a bottom line miss. So you don't have to be, somebody working up at 0.72 or BlackRock or Blackstone, Pete, to figure out that if the containers aren't coming over as full or as many, maybe these retailers aren't ordering as much. Is that part of the problem?
It sure could be, John. As a matter of fact, it's interesting because I think to try to defense against any negativity that would come out of these earnings, I think that's why maybe to sort of kind of manipulate things a little bit, they're bringing back the dividend of about 23 cents or something like that per quarter. That's something that sort of stood out for me. It's kind of like they're kind of dangling that out there in front of folks. They did miss on earnings, and you saw they missed on earnings, they missed on revenue, but the interesting thing is we are at a rate where everybody seems like they're daggone beating it, John, by about 80 some odd % at this point in time as we've gone through earnings season. And yet these guys missed. So that's not so great. But I'm sort of surprised that the stock didn't get hit even a little bit harder because of that. Stock is up not too terribly far from the 52-week highs. And yet it didn't get hammered as much as I would have expected. So there is something about this report that people are definitely clinging to. I think one of the things would be, yeah, they missed on the earnings, but they are up from a year ago when they had losses, and now they're actually having earnings that are on the positive side, even if they missed those numbers. So I think from that perspective, that's one of the reasons why they're not hammering the stock more.
And Pete, a lot of folks, I think, looked at this one. It was the end of March, folks. Pull it up sometime, ZIM. Pull up a chart. And what you'll see is that it doubled since the end of March. Doubled. We had unusual activity several times. We rode that double, or as Sir Mix-a-Lot would say, Pete, that juicy double. I won't say the rest of it, but I'll just give you that. But it was a juicy double, and it moved up from $9.40 or something like that through 19, Pete. Mm-hmm. And now it's getting a little bit of a pullback. They've got their Super Bowl, if you will, coming up, because everything that the stores are ordering for Christmas starts shipping in just a few weeks. Well, maybe a couple months, really, because by Labor Day, it's all off the high seas and going on to, trucks, semis. Those containers are being put on there to get them out to distribution centers and start getting ready for Christmas. So like I say, we're just a couple months away from that. And I think that's why people aren't selling it quite as hard, Pete. Mm-hmm. Let's now switch gears and talk a little about what's going on right here, Pete, with VFS, because the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration opened a preliminary investigation into the causes of a fatal accident at the end of April. So nobody's making jokes about this. Somebody dies, family members died in this crash in Pleasanton, California. And VFS, Pete, that's that company that you and I have talked about a lot, where it came public through, I think it was a direct listing, maybe even, Pete. Mm-hmm. And then the guy started slowly doling out shares as it exploded through $65 or $70 a share. Well, now it's way down. And because of this investigation, they're going down again, Pete.
Mm-hmm. Well, and to your point, John, how about this 52-week low, 2.25, 52-week high, 93. So here it is trading at $5.50. I'd say it's pretty damn close to those 52-week lows for all the right, reasons right now. I mean, this is a Vietnam auto manufacturer, EV, very, very, very inexpensive, which is what everybody thought that they wanted. Well, unfortunately, you've got a $10,000 vehicle. People are attracted to that, of course, and it's an EV, so they think, oh, this is fantastic. But is it? And that's part of the problem. And apparently some of the commentary that I read about on this particular case where the parents died as well as the children, they were talking about that there was a steering issue even previous to this. So that might be something that could be very, very not so great for the company. I mean, certainly if they knew something about this and then maybe it was reported, I'm not sure if it was or not, but apparently the owner of the car said, yeah, I had a steering issue previous to this. So anyway, I don't know. This is definitely, if you want to talk about a no touch, John, this is a no touch. I'm not touching this thing at all. It's, it's unfortunate that they didn't have everything in place, but certainly this is going to be something that's going to be decided in court at some point in time.
Yeah. And the founder of the company, Pete, tried to, by not releasing any of the shares, so you couldn't short it for the longest time. That's when last August, like Pete said, it went into the 90s. It must have just been there for a few hours or maybe a day or two, Pete. But the highs I remembered seeing were in the 70s. But for this thing to go into the 90s and now for it to be without any splits, folks, a $5 number, ouch. Yeah. That's pretty brutal. Yeah. All right. How about giving us a little update on what we should be looking at or paying attention to anyway, Pete, as far as sports go?
Yeah, we Major League Baseball is always interesting, but I will say this. First of all, the NFL, they can't stop with news. I mean, they got news every single day. They got free agents and all this stuff going on with the camps and everything. It's phenomenal, right? I mean, anybody who knows why the NFL is 24/7, 365 days a year, it's because they can figure out something to talk about every single day. So they're still there, John, in the backdrop. But you've got the NBA. We've got this great, as we're looking at the semifinals and everything, it looks exciting. We've got all the right teams there from what it seems like right now. But I'll tell you what, Shohei Ohtani, everybody got caught up in this whole thing about the gambling and this guy, and all the different things going on. It really did bother him, right, Ohtani? I mean, the guy isn't playing very well. Well, wait a minute. It seems like maybe he does okay. And it just shows you who he is. John, at 6'4", 220 pounds, this guy is a great batter. And I guess the question I'll throw to you is, are they going to try to turn him into something a lot more similar to somebody in the past? Let me think for a second. Who was the home run king forever? Used to be a pitcher. I think that might be what they're looking at, John, is does he even need to stay and does he have to go both sides? Does he have to be a pitcher? He leads Major League Baseball in batting average at 353. He's tied with Aaron Judge. Everybody thinks he's the greatest home run king in the world, right? They're both tied for fourth with 13 home runs. I'd say he's doing pretty well. He's number one in the league in hits with 67 hits so far this year. So should he ever go back to pitching, John, or does he do the route of Babe Ruth and say, you know what, I can pitch. I was pretty damn good as a pitcher, but I think I might just focus on the bats. What do you think? I mean, is it smarter for him just to sit there at the plate and hit the ball, or should he continue to do both? Does he have to do both?
Well, we both know the stress that Major League pitching puts on a person's arm. Everything from Tommy John surgery to, just the wear and tear that maybe his bat speed slows down a bit. But he's certainly showing no signs of that, Pete. And a couple days ago, he had a walk-off homer to win the game for the Dodgers. They had about 53,000 fans. Think of that, folks. Most major league parks don't hold more than 40. They had 53,000 for the Dodgers. So you kind of understand a little bit more. Pete and I think, are pretty good at math. Mark's probably even better. But if you've got 53,000 fans, Pete, you can see how you can afford $700 million contract, because that's his deal. I mean, Pete, when they're going up against teams like yours up in Minnesota, the Twins, who maybe that stadium, I'm not sure if it holds 38,000, Pete. Yeah. Or you're looking at a stadium, down in Tampa Bay. Again, maybe 30 some odd thousand. I don't know how you compete, really, because you might end up paying luxury taxes and things like that when you go so far over the limit, but you can afford it when you can put 53,000 people in the seats. And that's what this guy does. He puts butts in the seats, just like Aaron Judge does. You and I both love him. He's, of course, with the Yankees just up the street from where I am. But, man, I think it's exciting to watch both those two players. Mm-hmm. And Aaron Judge is a great player. Ohtani might be just that much better, Pete.
Yeah, he's an incredible athlete. It's incredible what he's accomplished in his career. By the way, as a pitcher, John, he's 38-19 in his ERA of 3. So I'd say he's pretty damn good at almost anything he wants to do, and he's a big son of a gun as well. But unbelievable. Speaking of two-way, how about this? How about a two-sport athlete? Now, a two-way player in college football is a big deal, right? I mean, we've talked about Travis Hunter for Colorado. He came up, he followed Deion Sanders up there, and unbelievable player, right? He's a great receiver. He did a great job as a cornerback. It's a lot of stress on a guy to be able to do that in a game, though, because you're playing 60 or 70 plays. That's incredible that you're able to even do something like that. But I've got a guy named Jordan Faison, John. He's at Notre Dame. Now, he's a top 50 lacrosse player, so he is damn good. And there's a lot of guys playing lacrosse in these universities across the country. It's no longer this East Coast, it's just these guys on the East Coast. They have gone all the way East Coast to West Coast, and obviously in the Midwest. And I say that because Notre Dame is the one who last year beat Duke for the national championship. Well, this kid, Jordan Faison, is unbelievable what he's been able to do, John, because he's not only played football his freshman year, and all of a sudden he turns into this unbelievable player for them on the offensive side. He's a slot receiver. His starting date started at USC game, which is a huge rivalry for Notre Dame. He lit it up. The kid has done everything on the football field. The coach loves him. Everybody loves him. But, his real sport is lacrosse. And, John, these guys are the number one lacrosse team in the nation right now. They are just about going to the national championships again. I mean, it's really starting to whittle down. But what he's been able to accomplish, this kid is a lot of fun. He's got all the skills that you'd want in a receiver, but also as a lacrosse guy. I mean, think about this. He's agile. He's fast. He's athletic. He can do just about everything. And then you get him on the football field, and they say, we just want him. They want him so bad. But he's a walk-on over there. So interesting to see. I'm amazed at these guys that can do this. Can you imagine, John, at the D1 level, doing what this kid's doing in two sports that are that taxing on the body? I mean, he's literally playing a lacrosse game, and then he runs across and he goes over for spring ball for football whenever he's able to. I mean, that's just how crazy this is. It's absolutely amazing. And my hat's off to him. But what do you think? I mean, I'll tell you what, Travis Hunter is amazing. This is at the next level of amazing, I'd say.
And Pete, in the Sun Bowl, which, since Notre Dame didn't have the world's greatest season, they started off like they were going to be, and then, kind of fizzled. And there's only those 4 teams that get those top bowls. Yeah. So they played in the Sun Bowl, and he was the slot receiver. And it's pretty amazing that he in a lot of ways, Pete, not only is he tough, but he's kind of like you. He loves to chirp. He loves to talk to the players on the other team. I remember, folks, that when Pete was playing, they had him mic'd up on the USA networks, and they had to bleep about every other word that was coming out of his mouth. Because he liked talking to the other players too. But yeah, I like him, Pete. And it's not that either Pete or this guy were dirty players, but they just love to get under guys' skin. And he's not a big guy, Pete. He's I think he's like 5'10", 180 or something like that. But, that lends itself well. It used to be that's what hockey players looked like. because, they could be quick and move around the ice really fast. Now some of the big guys are like that too.
Mhm.
But as far as wide receiver or slot receiver, think of like Wes Welker, Pete, or Julian Edelman, for two of the guys Brady loved to throw to. This guy reminds me a little bit of that. Now, it's too early. I'm not saying he's those guys, but I am saying, he's got the same sort of toughness that those guys had, and that kind of makes him exciting on the lacrosse field as well.
Yeah, he's a heck of an athlete. He's amazing to watch. He does chirp a lot. You're right. And I'll never forget our mother being very angry with me when she found out what I was saying when I was on the field. She didn't think it was funny at all, but I still did.
Yeah, you still did. And, I don't know if Ray Lewis talked any more trash than you either, Pete. We're going to have to get Ray on the show one of these days, and you and he can compare notes on trash talking.
Well, it's going to be R-rated.
That's all right. We can do that.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for joining us, folks. As I've said from the top of the show, the background here, that's Battlefin. There's 800 or 1,000 people here for alternative data, checking out what's going on in alternative data. And then there's a couple more talks that Mark and I have to give from here. But as always, we'd encourage you guys to check out marketrebellion.com/get started, because if you need a mentor, let's say that you're trying to learn something, whether it's lifting weights, for fitness, or whether it's math, whatever it is, it's always good to have a mentor or somebody that can coach you through. Well, we've got that at Market Rebellion. We've got a whole bunch of great young and old, both traders that can show you all the tricks of the trade, so you don't just have to learn by the school of hard knocks. Mm-hmm. So check out marketrebellion.com/get started, and we will be back tomorrow at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. Bang.